The crystal chandelier, a galaxy of frozen tears, dripped light onto the laughing faces below. From his position near the marble bar, Alex watched the scene unfold, not as a man scorned, but as an architect observing the structural integrity of a building he knew was about to collapse. Chloe, his ex-girlfriend, was the epicenter of the impending disaster. She stood radiant in a dress the color of champagne, her arm linked through that of her fiancé, Marcus Thorne. They were the sun and moon of this contrived universe, and everyone else was merely a satellite. She was telling a story, her voice a tinkling bell of carefully curated amusement, and Alex knew, with the chilling certainty of a prophet, that he was its subject. "Oh, Alex was sweet," she said, her voice carrying across the polished floor, just loud enough to be an accident. But bless his heart, he was just artistically inclined. You know what that means. A ripple of knowing laughter went through Marcus's family, the Thorns, a clan whose faces seemed carved from old money and disdain. He had dreams, but no foundation. The architectural pun was not lost on Alex. It was a cruel, deliberate barb. Marcus squeezed her hand, a look of proprietary pride on his face. "We were just in different stratospheres," Chloe concluded, her gaze flicking dismissively toward the bar, where Alex stood. She wanted him to see. She wanted him to feel the full, crushing weight of her ascension and his perceived stagnation. Her friends called him her broke ex, a little piece of her past she'd generously polished off and discarded. They had no idea. They saw a man in a simple, well-tailored but unremarkable suit, nursing a club soda, and assumed he was a ghost at their feast, a pathetic moth drawn to a flame that had long since left him behind for a brighter, hotter star. They didn't know that for 3 years, a full 36 months, the rent on the fashionable downtown loft she still called home had been paid not by her dwindling trust fund or her phantom freelance marketing career, but by him, by the broke ex. And in the inner pocket of his suit jacket, resting against his heart, was the proof, a slim, unassuming leather-bound ledger. Within its pages, in his own neat architectural script, was the meticulous accounting of her betrayal. The chandelier overhead seemed to hum with anticipation. Within the hour, its light would illuminate not a triumph, but a demolition. If this is the kind of story that speaks to you, the kind of moment where truth finally finds its voice, then do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next. And I'd love to know where you're watching from tonight. Drop your city in the comments below, and let's get back to the moment everything changed. The end had not come like a sudden storm, but like a slow, creeping frost. It began 3 years and 4 months ago, in that very loft he was now financing from afar. It had been their space then, a shared dream rendered in exposed brick and oversized windows. Alex had loved its potential, the way the morning light spilled across the hardwood floors, the promise of a life built together within its walls. Chloe, he realized later, had only ever loved its address. The first sign of the frost was a conversation that had felt, at the time, like a minor squall. He had just presented her with a first edition of a book on urban planning by her favorite theorist, a thoughtful, deeply personal birthday gift. She had smiled, a quick, brittle thing, and placed it on the coffee table where it remained, its spine uncracked. Later that evening, she'd pointed to a photo in a magazine of a socialite dripping in diamonds. "Don't you ever want that, Alex?" she'd asked, her voice wistful. "The freedom, to not have to think about budgets." He'd misunderstood, thinking she was worried about their shared finances. "We're doing okay, Chloe. The firm is landing bigger projects. We're building." She had looked at him then, and for the first time, he saw not a partner, but a critic. "Building is so slow," she'd murmured, turning the glossy page. The frost had touched the windows of their home that night, and a part of him knew, deep down, that it was creeping inside. 2 months later, the company she worked for in public relations underwent a restructuring. She was laid off. She presented it as a catastrophe, a tidal wave of misfortune that had singled her out. She wept in his arms, her tears feeling strangely performative, her grief too perfectly articulated. He was her rock, her savior. "Don't worry," he had told her, his voice steady, his resolve absolute. "I've got you. We'll figure this out. I can cover things for a while." Her relief was immediate and total. There was no discussion of her finding another job, no talk of tightening their belts. There was only the soft, sighing acceptance of his offer. The first payment was for $4,200. He'd made the transfer from his personal account to the landlord's portal, an act that felt like a sacrament of his love and commitment. He had made a note of it in a new ledger he'd bought that day, not out of suspicion, but out of a methodical need for order. It was an expense, a loan between partners, and he tracked it the same way he would track the material costs of a new project. Date, amount. Purpose, Chloe's rent. He believed it was a temporary measure, a bridge to get them to the other side of her bad luck. He did not yet understand that he was not building a bridge, but funding an escape route. Her escape from him. The change was subtle at first. Her job search was curiously passive, a series of half-hearted applications and networking lunches that produced nothing but expensive receipts. Instead, her social life blossomed. She began spending more time with a wealthier circle of friends, women whose husbands and fathers had names that were etched onto the sides of buildings. Alex, with his quiet dedication to his craft, his worn sketchbooks, and his preference for a quiet dinner over a loud gala, became an accessory she was increasingly embarrassed by. He was the sensible, comfortable shoes she wore at home, while she was trying on glass slippers elsewhere. Then came Marcus Thorne. He was everything Alex was not. Loud where Alex was quiet, ostentatious where Alex was reserved, a man who inherited a portfolio instead of building one. He met Chloe at a charity auction she'd attended with a friend, an event Alex had begged off of due to a looming project deadline. She came home that night buzzing with a different energy, her eyes shining with the reflected glare of Thorne's inherited wealth. She spoke of his yacht, his family's estate in the Hamptons, his casual dismissal of a 5-figure bid on a piece of art. She didn't mention him as a romantic interest, not yet. He was simply a fascinating specimen from a world she yearned to inhabit. Alex listened, a cold knot forming in his stomach. He was paying the rent on the apartment where she was dreaming of another man's life. The ledger on his desk felt heavier that night. He made the second payment, and the third, and he began to understand that he was no longer a partner. He was an investor in his own obsolescence. The humiliation, when it became a conscious strategy on her part, was a masterpiece of passive aggression. It was never a direct assault, but a series of carefully placed slights designed to erode his confidence and highlight his perceived inadequacies. At a dinner party with her new, glossy friends, the conversation turned to summer travel plans. Tuscany, St. Bart's, the south of France. When someone asked Alex where he and Chloe were going, she had laughed, a light, airy sound that was sharper than glass. "Oh, Alex is far too busy building his little empire of blueprints. He's more of a staycation kind of guy." The table smiled politely, the translation clear to everyone. He can't afford it. Alex said nothing, merely taking a sip of his wine, the liquid feeling like acid in his throat. He had just returned from a week in Copenhagen studying sustainable urban design, a trip his firm had paid for, but he knew explaining this would only make him sound defensive and petty. He was learning that in Chloe's world the truth was secondary to the narrative. and the narrative was that he was small, and she was destined for something grander. He would gently bring up the subject of the rent, always framing it as a point of concern for her, not for him. "Hey, have you had any luck on the job front? I just want to make sure you're feeling secure." Her response was always a variation on the same theme of wounded indignation. "Alex, please don't pressure me. It's so stressful. I thought you understood." The implication was that his financial support was a gift freely given, and to even mention its practical realities was a gross violation of their emotional contract. He was no longer a lover offering a helping hand. He was a creditor, and she resented him for it. Meanwhile, Marcus Thorne's presence became a fixture. He would send cars for her. Lavish bouquets of flowers would arrive, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the quiet, minimalist aesthetic Alex had cultivated in their home. A Cartier bracelet appeared on her wrist, a new handbag on the hall table. She wore and displayed these trophies of another man's affection in the apartment he was paying for, a daily, silent monument to his foolishness. Each month, on the 1st, the landlord's email would arrive, and each month Alex would open his banking app, make the transfer, and then open his ledger. The columns were growing. Rent, utilities. On one occasion, a 4-figure sum for an emergency dental procedure that coincided with a weekend trip to Miami with her friends. He documented it all. The ledger was no longer just a record of expenses, it was becoming a catalog of his own slow heartbreak, a testament to his patience, a patience he knew was finite. His breaking point was not a dramatic confrontation, but a quiet, soul-crushing moment of clarity. He came home early from work one afternoon, hoping to surprise her with takeout from their favorite Thai place. He found her in the living room, on the phone, her back to the door. Her voice was different, animated, and cruel. I know, she was saying, laughing. "He's still paying for it. It's like a charity, the Alex Miller Foundation for Aspiring Socialites. Honestly, if he wasn't so pathetic, it would be sad." A pause. "No, of course he has no idea about Marcus. He thinks I'm just trying to find myself. He's so earnest. It's almost painful to watch." Alex stood in the doorway, the bag of food growing cold in his hand. The smell of pad thai, once a scent of comfort and shared intimacy, now smelled like decay. He didn't storm in. He didn't yell. He simply backed away, silent and unseen, and closed the door to the life he thought they were building. He went back to his office, sat down at his drafting table, and looked at the plans for the new cultural center his firm had been commissioned to design. A landmark project that would redefine the city's skyline. He was building something real, something permanent, while his own life had been revealed as a facade. That night, he didn't go home. He slept on the couch in his office. The next day, he moved his things out while she was at a yoga retreat that was, he saw from a tagged photo on social media, actually a weekend on Marcus Thorne's boat. He left her a simple note. "I think it's best we go our separate ways. I'll be in touch about the logistics." He didn't mention the apartment. He didn't mention the money. He simply vanished from her daily life. The rent, however, he continued to pay. It was no longer an act of love or support. It was now a calculated investment in the truth. The weeks that followed his departure were a study in Chloe's spectacular lack of self-awareness. She sent him a flurry of texts, a perfect blend of feigned concern and accusation. "Where are you? I'm so worried." Followed by, "How could you just leave without talking to me? This is so immature." She never once asked the practical question, who would pay the rent now? In her mind, the Alex Miller Foundation was still open for business. He responded to none of them. Instead, he consulted a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Evelyn Reed. He laid out the situation, presenting the ledger as evidence. Evelyn's eyes widened slightly as she scanned the pages. "Mr. Miller," she said, her voice crisp, "this is extensive. You have grounds for a civil suit that you would almost certainly win." Alex shook his head. "I don't want a lawsuit. I don't want to drag this through the courts. I just want to be prepared. I want to understand my position." He explained his plan, the endgame he had been quietly constructing. Evelyn leaned back, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Poetic justice," she murmured. "I like it. It's cleaner, more impactful." She advised him on how to formalize his documentation, ensuring every transfer was irrefutable. She helped him draft a formal letter of debt, to be deployed only when the time was right. His secret preparation became his solace. While Chloe was busy cementing her place in Marcus's world, attending galas and being fitted for couture, Alex was working. He poured his energy into his projects, his focus absolute. His firm, Ethelred and Vance, was discreet but immensely successful, known for its innovative, high-concept designs that commanded staggering fees. He was not just an architect. He was a senior partner, a fact he had never advertised. He didn't drive a flashy car or wear a designer watch. His wealth was quiet, invested in his business, in art, in experiences. Not in the baubles Chloe and her new tribe valued. He found a grim, situational irony in the fact that the engagement party for Chloe and Marcus was to be held at the Atrium, a stunning new venue that was the jewel in the crown of his firm's latest portfolio. He had personally overseen every detail of its design, from the soaring glass ceiling to the custom-milled oak floors. He had received a personal invitation not from Chloe, but from the owner of the venue, a major client who wanted to introduce him to some potential investors. He knew Chloe would be there. He knew she would see him. He also knew she would misinterpret his presence as an act of desperation, of a sad ex unable to let go. He let her believe it. He wanted her confidence to be at its absolute peak when the foundation finally gave way. The night of the party, he dressed with quiet intention. His suit was bespoke, but its quality was in the cut and the fabric, not the label. In his pocket, the ledger felt like a cool, hard stone of truth. He was not there to cause a scene. He was there to present an invoice. The tension in the room was a palpable thing, a low hum beneath the string quartet and polite chatter. Alex felt it coalesce around him as Marcus Thorne, flanked by his father and a younger brother, approached the bar. Marcus's smile was a thin, predatory slash. It was the smile of a man who had never been told no in his life, a man who believed every problem could be solved with a checkbook. He looked Alex up and down, his gaze lingering for a moment on Alex's simple, elegant watch, a vintage piece inherited from his grandfather. Marcus, by contrast, wore a timepiece that was larger and more complex than a dashboard, a gaudy declaration of wealth. "Miller, is it?" Marcus began, his tone dripping with condescension. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. This is a private event." Chloe hovered a few feet behind him, a look of vindicated pity on her face. This was her night, slaying the pathetic dragon of her past. She had orchestrated this confrontation, whispering in Marcus's ear about her stalker ex, who just couldn't move on. Alex met Marcus's gaze, his own expression unreadable. "There's no misunderstanding, Thorne. I was invited by Jonathan Croft, the owner." This was a fact, and its simple delivery momentarily threw Marcus off his rhythm. He glanced back at Chloe, who gave a slight shake of her head, a silent communication that this was a lie, a desperate gambit. Marcus recovered quickly, his arrogance reasserting itself. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a checkbook and a gold pen, a gesture of such theatrical vulgarity that Alex almost smiled. "Look, I get it. It's tough," Marcus said, his voice now laced with a false, magnanimous pity. "You see her, You see all this, and it stings. I understand. So let's just put an end to it." He began to write, the pen scratching against the paper. "What's the number? What's it going to take for you to disappear? 5,000? 10? Name it. I'll write you a check right now, and you can walk out of here and never bother Chloe again." This was the moment. The precipice. The quiet before the storm. Every eye in their vicinity was now on them. This was the ultimate humiliation. The transactional dismissal of his entire history with Chloe, reduced to a payoff from her new, wealthier man. Chloe watched, her eyes gleaming. This was the final perfect scene in the movie of her life she was directing. The broke ex, paid off and sent away. Alex let the silence stretch. He didn't look at the checkbook. He didn't look at Marcus's smug face. He looked at Chloe, directly at her, and for the first time that night, she saw something in his eyes that wasn't pain or longing, but something colder, harder, something that looked like judgment. Then he reached into his own jacket. He moved with a calm, deliberate grace that drew the attention of everyone nearby. He did not pull out a wallet. He produced the slim, leather-bound ledger. He placed it on the marble countertop of the bar with a soft, definitive sound. The book looked old, personal, an object of significance. "I appreciate the offer, Thorne," Alex said, his voice quiet but carrying with absolute clarity in the sudden hush. "But I'm afraid your numbers are a little off. You see, I'm not here to ask for money. I'm here to collect." He opened the ledger. The pages were filled with his neat, precise script. He ran his finger down the first column. "Let's start with March, 3 years ago. Rent for the loft on Allister Street. $4,200. He looked up, his gaze sweeping from Marcus to Chloe, and then to Marcus's father, a man who understood balance sheets better than he understood his own son. April, same amount. May, same amount, plus $640 for the utilities, which he'd forgotten to pay. He turned a page, and here in June, an interesting one. An emergency root canal. $2,800. Transferred on a Friday. The same Friday, I believe, you and Chloe had your first weekend away in Nantucket, Marcus. The air crackled. Marcus's smug expression began to dissolve, replaced by a flicker of confusion, then dawning horror. Chloe's face went white. She took a step forward, her voice a strained whisper. "Alex, what are you doing? Stop it." He ignored her, his focus absolute. He was a builder, and he was laying his foundation, brick by painful brick. "I don't need your $10,000, Alex said, his voice dropping, becoming even quieter, which only made it more powerful. "Because according to my calculations, after 36 consecutive months of rent, utilities, and miscellaneous emergencies, Chloe already owes me $187,450. The number landed in the center of the opulent room with the force of a physical blow. $187,450. It was a sum too specific to be a lie, too large to be dismissed. The sound in the room ceased to be a hum of chatter and became a collection of sharp, indrawn breaths. Marcus Thorne stared at Alex, then at the ledger, then at Chloe, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. The checkbook in his hand suddenly looked like a child's toy. His father, a man accustomed to assessing risk, took a half step back from Chloe, his eyes narrowed with cold, instant calculation. He was no longer looking at a future daughter-in-law. He was looking at a liability. Chloe was frozen, her champagne-colored dress suddenly looking cheap, her radiant smile a grotesque memory. "He's lying," she stammered, her voice thin and reedy. "He's obsessed. He's making it all up because he can't stand to see me happy." But her denial was weak, laced with the panic of someone caught in an irrefutable truth. Her eyes darted around, seeking an ally, but found only shocked, accusing stares. Alex did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He simply turned another page in the ledger. "Every payment is documented," he said calmly, addressing not Chloe, but Marcus's father. "Date, amount, and bank transfer confirmation number. My lawyer has copies of the corresponding bank statements. It's all there." He then delivered the final, devastating payload, the piece of information that would recontextualize the entire evening. He gestured vaguely at the magnificent room around them, at the soaring glass ceiling and the intricate steel beams that supported it. "You're standing in my building, Mr. Thorne." A confused silence followed. "I mean," Alex clarified, his voice still level, "I designed it. My firm is Ethelred and Vance. I'm the Vance. Jonathan Croft, the owner, is a client of mine. I was here tonight to meet with him and a potential investor from Singapore about a new resort project." He paused, letting the full weight of his statement settle. "I wasn't crashing your party. You were holding it in my office." The reversal was total, the power shift absolute and brutal. He was not the broke ex. He was not the charity case. He was the architect of the very stage on which they had chosen to humiliate him, and he had just brought the entire production to a crashing halt. He was the foundation, and he had just shown them all that he could take it all down, piece by piece, with nothing more than a quiet voice and an old leather book filled with the truth. The immediate aftermath was a tableau of shattered illusions. Marcus Thorne, a man whose entire identity was built on the unshakable bedrock of his family's wealth and status, looked as if the floor had just vanished from beneath his feet. He turned to Chloe, his face contorted in a mask of rage and humiliation. "Is it true?" he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "Did you take his money? All of it?" Chloe began to sob, a desperate theatrical display that now rang utterly false. "He's twisting it, Marcus. It was a loan. He offered. He wanted to help me." Her words were a frantic scramble for purchase on a sheer cliff face of exposure, but it was too late. The narrative she had so carefully constructed had been demolished. Marcus's father, a man of brutal pragmatism, stepped forward. He ignored Chloe completely, his shrewd eyes fixed on Alex. "Mr. Vance," he said, the name change a clear acknowledgement of the new power dynamic. "My apologies. It seems we have been misinformed. This is a family matter. We will handle it." It was a dismissal, an attempt to contain the damage, to scrub the public stain of this disastrous scene. He put a firm hand on his son's shoulder, pulling him away from Chloe, creating a physical and symbolic distance between the Thorne family and the woman who was now a source of profound embarrassment. From across the room, a woman detached herself from the stunned crowd and approached them. It was Sophia, Marcus's younger sister. Alex had met her once before, briefly, and had been struck by her quiet intelligence, a quality that seemed entirely absent in the rest of her family. She had her brother's features, but her eyes held a depth and perception he lacked. She did not look at her brother or her father. She looked at Alex. There was no pity in her expression, only a profound and surprising respect. "I'm sorry for my family's behavior," she said, her voice clear and steady. "What they did was inexcusable." She then turned to Chloe, her gaze hardening. "And you," she said, her voice dropping, "should be ashamed of yourself." It was a simple, cutting statement, but coming from within the Thorne clan, it was a verdict. The final nail in the coffin of Chloe's ambitions. The silent enabler in this drama, Chloe's mother, Eleanor, who had been preening amongst the Thornes' friends, now scurried to her daughter's side. She shot Alex a look of pure hatred, the fury of a co-conspirator whose scheme has just been exposed. Alex met her gaze, his expression unyielding. He didn't have to say a word. Her silence over the past 3 years, her complicity in her daughter's deceit for the sake of a wealthy match, had just cost them everything. Jonathan Croft, the venue owner, finally made his way through the crowd, his face a mixture of confusion and concern. "Alex, what's going on? Is there a problem?" Alex closed his ledger. He gave a small, weary smile. "No problem at all, Jonathan. Just settling an old account." The days that followed were a cascade of consequences. The engagement, of course, was broken. The announcement came not from Chloe, but from a terse press release issued by the Thorne family's publicist, citing irreconcilable differences. The subtext was clear to anyone in their social circle. Chloe had been vetted and found wanting. She was cast out of the gilded cage she had so desperately tried to enter. She was no longer welcome at the clubs, the charities, the exclusive resorts. The gates to that world had not just closed, they had been barred and locked from the inside. Her phone, once buzzing with invitations and messages from her new high society friends, fell silent. She was a pariah, a cautionary tale whispered over cocktails and canapes. Her most egregious sin, in their eyes, was not the deception itself, but the fact that she had been caught. She had brought a mess, a public spectacle, to their doorstep, and for that, she was unforgivable. Chloe's attempts to contact Alex were frantic and pathetic. She left him tearful voicemails, vacillating between desperate apologies and bitter accusations. "How could you do that to me, Alex? You ruined my life," she cried in one message. In the next, she was pleading. "I'm so sorry. I know I messed up. Please, can we just talk? I can explain everything." He listened to none of them in their entirety. He had already heard everything she had to say in that one unguarded moment on the phone in their old apartment. Instead, he had his lawyer, Evelyn Reed, send her the formal letter of debt they had prepared, along with a proposed repayment plan. It was generous, structured over 10 years with minimal interest, allowing her to make small monthly payments. It was not an act of revenge. It was an act of finality. He was severing the last tie, turning their tangled emotional history into a simple, sterile financial transaction. He was giving her a path to reclaim a shred of dignity, a courtesy she had never extended to him. Her mother, Eleanor, called him once. Her tone was no longer haughty, but wheedling. "Alex, dear, surely you can see she's been punished enough. This legal business, it's so unpleasant. Can't you just let it go for old time's sake?" Alex's reply was cold and final. "There is no old time's sake, Eleanor. You knew. You knew she was using me, and you stood by and let it happen, hoping to profit from it. Her debt is financial. Yours is moral. Goodbye." He hung up the phone and blocked both of their numbers. Weeks turned into a month. The story of the engagement party became a minor legend in certain circles. Alex, who had always valued his privacy, found himself the subject of a new kind of attention. Potential clients who had once been hesitant were now eager to work with the Vance of Ethelred and Vance. His quiet confidence and the revelation of his hidden success made him an intriguing figure. He was the man who had outplayed the Thornes, not with money, but with integrity. He received a call from Sophia Thorne. "I hope this isn't too forward," she began, her voice hesitant, "but I wanted to see how you were, and to apologize again." They met for coffee. It was a strange, surprisingly comfortable conversation. She spoke with candid frustration about her family's obsession with image and status. He spoke of his passion for building things that last, things with substance. There was no romance, not yet, but there was a meeting of minds, a shared understanding of what it meant to value the real over the artificial. It was a breath of fresh air after 3 years of suffocating in Chloe's world of facades. One evening, about 2 months after the party, Alex was working late in his office, the city lights twinkling beyond his window. He was sketching a design for a new public library, a space dedicated to knowledge and truth. There was a knock on his door. It was Chloe. He hadn't seen her since that night, and the change was startling. She was stripped of her designer clothes and her defiant arrogance. She looked smaller, diminished. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she held a single envelope in her hand. "This is the first payment," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She held it out to him. He didn't take it. "You can mail it to my lawyer's office, Chloe. That's the arrangement." She flinched, but nodded, letting her hand drop. I just wanted to say it to your face," she said, looking at the floor. "I'm sorry. For everything. Not just the money. For how I treated you. For what I said. For what I became." Alex studied her for a long moment. He felt no anger, no triumph. Just a profound, weary sadness. He saw a woman who had gambled her character for a prize she never truly wanted, and had lost everything in the process. "Why did you do it, Chloe?" he asked, the question genuine. Was it worth it? She finally looked up, and her eyes filled with tears that for the first time seemed real. "I thought it was what I was supposed to want," she whispered. "I saw them, all those people with their perfect, shiny lives, and I thought that was happiness. I thought your life, our life, was too small, too quiet. I was a fool." She turned to leave. "Chloe," he said, stopping her. "The apartment. The lease is up next month. You'll need to be out by then." It was a final, practical detail, the last piece of their shared life to be dismantled. She nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "I know," she said. And then she was gone. The months that followed were a period of quiet reconstruction for Alex. He poured himself into his work, finding a renewed sense of purpose. The library project was approved, and it was hailed as a masterpiece of civic architecture. His friendship with Sophia deepened, evolving into something built on mutual respect and shared values. It was slow, cautious, and real. He never saw Chloe again, though he received a cashier's check at his lawyer's office on the 1st of every month, a silent, ongoing penance. Her name would occasionally pop up, mentioned by mutual acquaintances. She had moved out of the city, taken a modest job, and was, by all accounts, living a quiet life. She was paying off her debt, both financial and moral, one small, anonymous payment at a time. Alex took no pleasure in her downfall, but he found a quiet satisfaction in the restoration of order, in the simple, elegant justice of the outcome. He had not sought revenge. He had simply demanded that the truth be entered into the record. His ledger now sat on a shelf in his home office, no longer a catalog of grievances, but a reminder that the strongest foundations are not built with money or status, but with integrity, patience, and the quiet courage to hold fast to the truth, even when the world is telling you to let it go. In the end, what is the true measure of a person's worth? Is it the car they drive, the address they live at, the names they can drop at a party? Or is it found in the quiet moments, in the promises kept, in the dignity maintained in the face of disrespect? We live in a world that celebrates the facade, that mistakes visibility for value and noise for substance. But facades crumble. Noise fades. What remains is character. What endures is the life you build, not with flash and spectacle, but with the slow, methodical, and often unseen work of being a good and honest person. Alex's victory was not in exposing Chloe. It was in refusing to become like her. He held on to his own moral architecture, and it proved to be the only structure that was truly sound. He built a life of substance, and in the end, that is a legacy no amount of money can buy, and no amount of deceit can tear down. What do you think is the most important foundation for a successful life? Is it wealth, integrity, or something else entirely? I'd be fascinated to read your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story of vindication and quiet strength resonated with you, please show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing for more stories that explore the moments where character is truly revealed. Thank you for being a part of this community. Until next time, build well.